Once, the world looked to this ancient land with awe. Across the windswept hills and olive groves of Israel and Palestine, history's greatest faiths converged. This was the land of promise, the land of the prophets, where the echoes of Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad could almost be heard in the call to prayer, the chanting of psalms, and the ringing of church bells. The stones of Jerusalem, worn smooth by centuries of pilgrims, once seemed to pulse with the sanctity of devotion. Here, holiness was not just a word, but the very air that people breathed. But now, in the shadows of the holy city, a different story is being written. The sanctity that once defined this land is under siege, not from outside invaders, but from within. The decline is not sudden. It is a slow, relentless erosion, each stone chipped away by hands that once swore to protect it. And at the center of this unraveling stands one man, Benjamin Netanyahu. Since his return to power in late 2022, Netanyahu has presided over one of the most tumultuous periods in modern Israeli history. His government's controversial judicial reforms, unveiled in 2023, sparked an unprecedented wave of unrest. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis, religious and secular, young and old, flooded the streets, their voices echoing through the boulevards of Tel Aviv and the ancient alleyways of Jerusalem. They marched not just in protest of policy, but in defense of the very fabric of Israeli democracy. The reforms, critics warned, threatened to dismantle the independence of Israel's judiciary. For decades, the courts had served as a fragile but vital check on executive power, a last bulwark against the excesses of government. But Netanyahu, beset by corruption trials and desperate to maintain his grip on power, pushed forward. When Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, himself a respected figure, publicly called for a halt to the overhaul, Netanyahu dismissed him. The move only fanned the flames. Protest turned to outrage, outrage to chaos. Strikes brought the nation to a standstill. Even soldiers, long considered the heartbeat of Israeli society, refused orders in a gesture of defiance. As the nation fractured from within, violence erupted across the occupied West Bank. Settler attacks against Palestinian communities surged to levels unseen in years. In July 2025, the world watched in horror as Palestinian homes and churches were set ablaze in a wave of arson and assault. The U.S. ambassador to Israel called these attacks what many on the ground already knew: acts of terror. And yet, accountability remained elusive. The violence was not met with swift justice, but with silence, or at worst, tacit approval, from those in power. In these moments, the world glimpsed the true cost of Netanyahu's rule. The sanctity of the land, so long defended as a precious birthright, was being traded for political expedience. The ancient promise of Jerusalem, a city meant to be a beacon for all peoples, was crumbling under the weight of division, hatred, and unchecked ambition. Netanyahu's alliances with far-right politicians only deepened the rift. Religious rhetoric, once used to inspire and unite, became a weapon, wielded to justify settlements, evictions, and the suppression of dissent. Even rabbis and Holocaust survivors who dared to speak out found themselves branded as traitors. The Torah, the very heart of Jewish faith, was set aside in favor of slogans and propaganda. The message was clear: loyalty to Netanyahu's vision, not to the higher ideals of justice or compassion, was the new measure of faith. And so the lines hardened. In the streets, protesters clashed with police and each other. In the West Bank, Palestinian families mourned their dead and rebuilt their homes for the 100th time. Christian churches, once sanctuaries of peace, were scarred by fire and hate. Muslim worshippers at Al-Aqsa found themselves met by force, their prayers interrupted by fear. The sacred sites, once places of awe and reverence, now stood as silent witnesses to violence and betrayal. The world began to ask, what remains of the Holy Land? When holiness is no longer honored, when the pursuit of power eclipses the pursuit of peace, when leaders invoke the name of God not to heal but to divide, Netanyahu's defenders argue that his policies are necessary for Israel's security. They point to the dangers of terrorism and the threats surrounding the nation's borders. But security, real security, is built on justice, on trust, on the shared conviction that all lives are sacred. Without these, no wall is high enough, no iron dome strong enough to protect a nation from itself. As the chaos deepened, Israel's spiritual leaders, rabbis, priests, imams, pleaded for calm, for a return to the values that once made the land holy. Their voices, however, were drowned out by the drumbeat of conflict and the roar of political theater. For ordinary people, Israeli and Palestinian, Jew, Christian, and Muslim, the cost is measured not in speeches, but in shattered lives. Children pray in silence, their innocence scorched by the flames of hatred. Families cling to fading memories of peace, unsure if the future holds anything but more loss. This is no longer just a political crisis. It is a crisis of the soul. The land that once inspired the world with its promise of redemption now stands as a warning, that even the holiest of places can be profaned, not by outsiders, but by the betrayal of its own leaders. When power becomes the idol, when ambition tramples compassion, when justice is sacrificed on the altar of expedience, holiness dies. And with it, the hope that once drew millions to these dusty hills in search of meaning. Israel was holy. Now it is only haunted by the ghosts of what was and the fear of what might yet come. The world watches, mourning not just for a nation, but for the loss of something far greater, the sanctity of the sacred itself. This discussion is inspired by the passionate reactions and diverse perspectives shared across social media platforms. We want to know your thoughts. Do you agree with the points raised about the current situation in Israel and Palestine? Or do you see things differently? Share your opinions in the comments below. If you found this content insightful or thought-provoking, please consider supporting our channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing with others who care about these important issues.